All right, so now I'm back at the workbench, and as you can see, I've already cut off the arm that was here for the electric flaps. So, when you look at the drawings for the manual flaps off of the RV6, I believe, they show a measurement from the center line of this tube. And I've kind of marked it here with this black line. So that's roughly the center line of this tube. From there, you measure out across the length of this arm. You measure out 6 inches and 3/8 of an inch. And then you measure out to 8 1/8 inch. So again, from the center line of your tube, from there you come out 6 3/8 and then 8 1/8 inch. That gives you the length for this slot here. So it's basically 6 3/8 to here and then 8 1/8 to here. That gives you this slot. So when I measured that, what I plan to do is I'm going to use basically a coupling. So this is a piece of 4130 chrome moly steel, and it's an 1.1/8 in diameter, and I forget what the wall thickness is. I think it's 40 something wall, and that gives you like 1.009 inch ID, which slips over top of this really nice. I've already had this on here and it fits really, really well. So that's my plan, is to use some kind of a coupling like this, and then I'll slide my other length of tubing into here, and I plan on using rivets to hold all this together. But I did not want this sleeve, when it's in place, hope that doesn't fall off of there, I did not want this sleeve to end up being anywhere where that slot is going to be. So I wanted to make sure that the slot is positioned out here somewhere. I didn't want it to be within the confines of this splice. The other thing is this arm, when you measure it, it tapers down kind of like these do here. You can see how it starts here and then it starts to taper down to this smaller dimension here. It's hard to gauge just by looking at it where that taper begins, but if you measure it, I measured with a caliper on this arm, and of course with the powder coating it's it's just slightly over an inch here. But very soon after that, there's not a lot of straight length on here, it starts to taper. I'm switching sides because I think my camera's having a hard time focusing. So it starts to taper down relatively quick. So I cut this back just to make sure that this is a full 1 inch in diameter for the whole length. And it works out really nice because with this length here, I can make a 3-inch splice. I can fit this, I have a line here that represents, this line is 1.5 inches from here. So with this 3-inch splice, if I fit this on here, if I slide this on all the way down to the 1.5 inch mark, the overall length then is still shorter than this length here. So if you can imagine this piece being my white weldment, and I've got this splice in place, it basically will look something like that. And then my other piece will come into here and it will recess into here 1.5 inches. And this slot will only be on this piece here. It will not interfere with this. So that's the plan. So I've got this cut back, I've got my 3-inch long splice. With this in place, it will not interfere with the slot. And now I've got this laid out for my rivets. So I don't know how well this will show up, but you can see on the very end, I've got some marks which represent the 6 locations for the rivets. And then I've extended those marks down the length of the tubing. And like I said, there are 6 of them. I have no idea if this is going to show up or not. And the way that I did that was simple. I used some free software off of the internet. And I went ahead and I drew up an inch and an eighth circle, OD. And then I bisected it with these lines to get my 6 locations for the rivets. And then it was just a matter of printing it out, actual scale, putting my tubing and aligning it perfectly with that circle. And then I just traced each one of these lines onto the tube. I just gave a little tick mark at each location on the tube, and then using a square, I extended those lines for the entire length, across the entire length of the tube. So now I've got perfectly spaced locations for the rivets on this piece of tubing. So my plan now is to take this and figure out how far back. Like I said, this is 3 inch. It's going to be centered. The 2 pieces of this piece here and my new piece are going to be butted together. So that butt splice, if you will basically be in the middle of this. So I need to figure out where I want to put my rivets and how many. If I want to stagger them, whatever. I just need to figure out how I'm going to do my rivets. Once I get that figured out, I'm going to drill this to size. I will slide this down over top of this 1.5 inches. I'll take my other tube and I will fit it in from this side till it hits this one. And at that point, I'll just transfer the holes that are already into this into here and into my tube here. And then at that point, I'll just blind rivet the whole thing together. Now you can, of course, since this is 4130 steel, you can just figure out what length you want this to be, fixture this, clean this off, and just weld. That's a better alternative potentially. But I don't have access to a welder. I don't feel like tracking down a welder. I don't feel like finding friends, family, whoever to get that job done. So I'm just going to sleeve it and use rivets. All right. So let me get some measurements. Let me get this piece here made. Let me get this piece here drilled. Do some dry fitting. Do some match drilling. And I'll be right back.